Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the frost-laced world of 17th century Sweden, where the snow crunches softly beneath your boots and the smell of pinewood fires wafts gently through the stone halls of a royal palace. You're not a soldier, not yet anyway. Right now, you're just a quiet observer in a thick wool cloak, standing in the corner of a cold, candlelit nursery. Outside, the wind hums low over frozen lakes. Inside, an infant wails, strong-lunged and stubborn. His name? Gustavus Adolphus. No one knows it yet, but this baby is going to lead armies across Europe, redesign warfare, and occasionally forget to eat because he's too busy writing battle strategies on horseback. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what's your location and local time right now? I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here to witness not the thunder of war, not yet. Tonight, we begin where most great military careers begin, in a freezing palace with too many tutors and not enough sleep. Gustavus Adolphus was born in 1594 in the royal palace of Stockholm. During one of those endless Swedish winters that make you question why anyone builds anything out of stone. His father, Charles IX, was a king more out of rebellion than birthright. His mother, Christina of Holstein-Gottorp, came from solid German stock, pragmatic, chilly, probably quite good at folding linen. Your little future king grows up surrounded by maps, muskets, and court politics that would make a Byzantine blush. The boy speaks Latin before he can shave, and by the time he's 12, he's reading Roman military treatises for fun. You, meanwhile, are mostly trying to stay warm near the stove without catching your wig on fire. He's not your average princeling. Gustavus is stubborn, intense, and keeps asking uncomfortable questions about supply chains. He refuses to just wave a ceremonial sword at parades. He wants to know why the cavalry keeps getting bogged down in Swedish mud, and why the cannonballs never land where they're supposed to point one cold afternoon while you're nodding off in a Latin grammar lesson. Young Gustavus casually dismantles a model fortress and redesigns it using rolled-up parchment and a fork. He isn't trying to impress anyone. He just really hates bad logistics. By age 15, he's already shadowing commanders, riding long days through sleet to observe troop movements. He learns from the older men, but never imitates. He's got his own way of doing things. Some find him arrogant. Others find him, well, mostly just exhausting. Then, without much warning, his father dies. It's 1611. You're barely done with your afternoon nap, and suddenly Sweden has a teenage king in charge of a struggling kingdom. A boy in charge of taxes, treaties, and 3 different wars. No pressure. The court panics. Advisors huddle. One even suggests Gustavus take a regent, some boring uncle with a gray beard and a fondness for long speeches. Gustavus declines. Politely, but firmly. I'll wear the crown, he says, even if it still slips down over my ears. And so he does. His coronation robe drags a full 3 feet behind him. His boots squeak. Someone forgets the name of a bishop. But none of it matters. Because you can already feel it, can't you? The air's different. Like the moment before a snowstorm, when everything goes still. The boy who grew up with history books under his pillow has just become history himself. You sip a bit of warm lingonberry tea, wrap the blanket tighter, and settle in. This may take a while. Section 2. The thing about becoming king at 17 is that nobody really teaches you what to do with your hands. Do you clasp them behind your back like a portrait? Do you rest them on a globe, as if you're already planning to conquer Denmark before breakfast? Or do you just keep them folded and try not to look like a cold teenager in an itchy collar? You decide, like Gustavus Adolphus, to try all 3. The royal tutors, who once corrected his Latin declensions and scolded him for doodling cavalry formations in the margins of psalms, are now bowing deeply and asking how he'd like to restructure the Swedish navy. It's a strange reversal, and you can't help but smirk as the king, still not old enough to rent a carriage without a chaperone, starts outlining military logistics with the intensity of someone arranging his bookshelf. His education, to be fair, was no ordinary upbringing. There were no stuffed animals or lullabies in Gustavus's nursery. Instead, there were scrolls of Cicero, wooden models of forts, and a tutor named Johann Skit who believed that sleep was mostly optional. Skit had a mission: to raise a king who could think like a scholar, speak like a diplomat, and command like a Roman general. And he very nearly succeeded. Gustavus could debate you in Latin about Plato while simultaneously sketching the trajectory of cannon fire across the Daugava River. But all that learning didn't prepare him for the other part of being king: the daily meetings, the diplomatic flattery, the paperwork written on goatskin, and the long, dull ceremonies where people shout, "Long live the king," and expect him to smile like he means it. That's where you come in. As a close observer in the royal circle, your job isn't to fight or advise. No, your job is to follow Gustavus through his daily life and try to keep up with his pace, which is no small task when you consider the man sometimes walks 3 miles just to think through a budget proposal. You see him at dawn, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he reviews a shipment of faulty gunpowder. You see him at midday, trading quips in German with an ambassador while absent-mindedly adjusting the belt on his sword. You even see him late at night, curled under a bearskin rug in the war tent, whispering troop placements to himself like bedtime mantras. Sometimes he jokes, but they're not always very good jokes. You get used to the dry delivery, like, "If we run out of bullets, perhaps I'll just throw my crown." Ha. That's very funny, Your Majesty. Despite his intensity, Gustavus is not humorless. He just thinks best at a gallop, which is why you're often trying to jot down policy decisions from horseback, your ink freezing in the bottle while he yells something about centralizing the grain tax. And then there's coffee. Imported recently from the Ottoman world, coffee is still something of a novelty in Sweden. Gustavus tries it once, immediately regrets it. He calls it a soup made of burnt acorns and returns to his preferred drink, a slightly alcoholic berry tisane that makes you feel sleepy by page 5 of any official decree. But even the worst coffee in Europe can't distract him for long. His eyes are always scanning the maps, the ledgers, the letters from the front. Sweden, under his rule, isn't just cold, it's twitching with tension. War with Denmark simmers on the western border. Poland stirs uneasily to the southeast. And the Russians? Well, let's just say they're not sending fruit baskets. Gustavus is determined not just to survive this royal mess, but to win. He wants to build something solid, smart, and fast. He sees the monarchy not as a throne, but as a command post. You see it too that you're with him as he drafts new troop formations, ones that move like clockwork, not clumsy blobs. You watch him sketch a new type of cannon placement using leftover candle stubs and a stale piece of rye bread. He eats it afterward. Waste not. He is, in short, a king in motion, never quite at rest, never quite satisfied. Even when he finally sits at a too big table in a too big chair, you can tell his mind is marching miles ahead. One night, as the palace snores gently and your boots warm by the fire, you hear the king mutter in his sleep, "Faster, split the left flank." And you realize the war's already begun. At least in his head. Section 3. There's something oddly peaceful about managing a kingdom while barely out of puberty. Everything feels too big. Your responsibilities, your boots, even your ceremonial sword. But there's a strange confidence that comes from simply not knowing how badly things can go. At 17, Gustavus Adolphus isn't just king of Sweden. He's king of Sweden during a time when most of Europe thinks Sweden is optional. Nice to have around for timber and salted fish, perhaps, but not really a key player in anything besides extreme winter. And yet, here you are. The year is still 1611. The ink on Gustavus's royal seal is barely dry, and already Sweden is knee-deep in wars. Not one war, not even two, but 3. 3 simultaneous, ill-timed, frostbitten wars. You, standing to the side in a wool cloak that doesn't quite fit, are starting to wonder whether there's a Swedish word for, maybe we should take a nap first. Let's take stock. First, there's Denmark. The Danes, led by King Christian IV, are not subtle. They've just taken over a chunk of Swedish territory and are demanding tribute in the form of grain, silver, and probably some very cozy hats. The Danes have a navy. Sweden has hopes and prayers, and a few ships that creak when they turn too fast. Second, there's Russia, or more accurately, the mess that is Russia in the time of troubles. Multiple claimants to the throne, famine, uprisings. It's like trying to play chess on a frozen pond. Sweden gets involved not because it makes sense, but because someone hands Gustavus a letter saying, "Would you like to install a Swedish prince on the Russian throne?" And he just doesn't say no. Third, there's the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This one's personal. The Polish king, Sigismund III, used to be king of Sweden too, until Gustavus's dad booted him out. Now Sigismund wants the crown back, and he's got Catholic backing, long mustaches, and cavalry that moves like wind over a field. Gustavus calls him my very Catholic cousin, but not in a warm way. So that's where you find yourself. In a wooden command tent somewhere outside Kalmar, sipping thin broth that tastes like regret, while Gustavus pores over maps and mutters things like, "If we pivot through Livonia, we can..." Wait, is that cannon upside down? Despite the absurd odds, Gustavus doesn't panic. He organizes. He divides Sweden into regions, assigns governors, sets up local supply chains. He standardizes weaponry so bullets actually fit the guns, imagine that. And he invents what might be the world's first real field army, small, professional, and capable of moving faster than an angry letter from the Danish king. And then, to everyone's surprise, he leads from the front. Picture it, a teenage king, half frozen but wide awake, riding out ahead of his troops through Baltic fog, saber at his side and 3 inches of mud clinging to his boots. You follow behind, trying not to trip on your own scabbard, wondering how this counts as diplomacy. He fights at Kalmar against the Danes and personally supervises artillery positions. His voice cuts through cannon smoke like a lullaby if lullabies involved shouts like, "More powder," and "Lower that angle before I do it myself." Then he marches east. Russia is in chaos, but Gustavus doesn't want to rule it. He wants a buffer zone, a soft, snow-covered cushion between Sweden and the madness. He wins a few battles, installs a few friendly nobles, and then politely backs away before someone tries to hand him a czar's hat. And finally, the war with Poland. This one drags. The Polish hussars charge like demons on horseback, and Gustavus's infantry learns very quickly to dig trenches in a hurry. It's exhausting. At one point, you catch the king writing troop movements on the back of a soup recipe. Both are about balance, he says, and both are better with pepper. Yet, even amid the chaos, he manages to pass reforms. He sets up war colleges, standardizes rations, and writes letters to Maria Eleonora, his future queen, with just enough affection to soften the campaign's hard edges. And all this before he turns 21. At night, you sit beside the campfire, feet warmed by the embers, while Gustavus scribbles notes by candlelight. Above you, the stars twinkle through a hole in the tent fabric. Around you, snores rise from the bundled shapes of sleeping soldiers. And somewhere in the fog, distant drums thump like a heartbeat. You wonder how a boy with so many enemies sleeps so soundly. Maybe he doesn't, but the rest of us can. Section 4. If you've ever tried to sleep in armor, you'll understand why Gustavus Adolphus developed a lifelong grudge against chainmail. It's not just the weight. It's the way it digs in when you roll over, the cold bite of steel in the morning, and the awkward clanking when you try to sneak off for a midnight snack. So instead, he sleeps in wool. Thick, scratchy wool that smells faintly of pine and pipe smoke. It's not glamorous, but it's warm and it's quiet. And Gustavus needs quiet, because Poland is not being quiet at all. By the time you catch up with him in Livonia, the Polish-Swedish war is less of a formal affair and more like an endless neighborhood squabble with cavalry charges. Every hill has been fought over at least twice. Every village seems to change flags depending on the day of the week. Sigismund III, Gustavus's cousin and rival, keeps sending forces to reclaim the Swedish throne, often led by commanders who seem more interested in mustache maintenance than tactics. You and Gustavus start to recognize certain Polish generals just by the way their horses prance before battle. But while the enemy has flamboyance, Gustavus has efficiency. He isn't flashy. He's focused. Where others send in lines of infantry like dominoes, Gustavus coordinates. He builds flexible formations, small, modular units that can shift in the field. His musketeers aren't just armed, they're choreographed. Like dancers, only slightly louder and with more soot. And then there's the artillery. This is where Gustavus shines. He doesn't believe cannons should just sit at the back and thunder once every 10 minutes like bored opera singers. No, he designs mobile artillery. Lighter cannons mounted on sleigh-like carriages that can move quickly, turn easily, and reload in a pinch. You remember the first time you saw them roll out across a misty field. The soldiers called them the barking dogs. Gustavus called them finally useful. You called them loud enough to ruin tea. But the effect was stunning. At the Battle of Walhof in 1626, Gustavus deploys his infantry in a checkerboard layout, small blocks, easy to pivot. He positions his artillery between units rather than behind, letting them fire directly while being protected. The enemy doesn't know where to aim. They charge and the Swedish line bends, then snaps back like a tightly made bed sheet. It's clean, almost too clean. Afterward, you find Gustavus calmly sipping something vaguely berry-flavored, brushing gunpowder off his gloves. They came in rows, he murmurs, and we answered in rhythms. Of course, not everything is elegant. The weather still refuses to cooperate. You spend entire weeks in mud, watching Gustavus try to sign official documents while holding an umbrella with his knee. One time, a delegation from Lübeck arrives during a rainstorm, and half their proposals are smeared into abstract art. Then there are the horses. Gustavus loves his horses, but they don't always love him back. One particularly stubborn mare once dumped him in a puddle moments before a diplomatic parade. He stood up, dripping, saluted anyway, and declared, "Sweden is wet, but we are ready." It became a running joke in camp. Wet but ready. You also witness his growing relationship with his wife, Maria Eleonora, through their exchanged letters, kept folded inside his boot or under his saddle. They're not fiery love notes. They're domestic, curious, sometimes funny. "Today, I marched 17 miles, he writes, and thought of you for at least 3. He tells her about troop morale, bad soup, and his desire to come home soon. Soon is a relative term in royal war planning. You, meanwhile, spend your nights wrapped in furs, head resting against a barrel, listening to the soft crackle of frost on canvas and wondering what it's like to live a normal life, because this isn't normal. Most kings don't camp. Most kings don't memorize topography. Most kings don't personally train new recruits, demonstrating how to clean a musket using a soup spoon because the cleaning rod is missing. But Gustavus does. That's why you follow him. Across fields, through forests, into half-frozen rivers. Because beneath all the glory and tactics, there's something steadier, the sense that he actually cares. Not about fame or legacy, but about doing the job right. And if that job means being ankle-deep in sleet while explaining to a confused blacksmith how to make a breech-loading cannon carriage, so be it. You settle down for the night beside the fire, bones aching gently from the day's march. Across the embers, Gustavus is writing again, something about reorganizing cavalry rotations. His quill scratches like a lullaby. The snow begins to fall, and for now, all is calm. Section 5. The smell hits you first. It's a combination of damp wool, gun oil, and a kind of smoky porridge that's been reheated too many times in the same dented pot. You're deep in the Swedish military camp now, and the sun hasn't even risen. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is regretting its life choices. This is not a glamorous part of history. But it is the part Gustavus Adolphus thrives in. He's already up. Of course he is. While you're still adjusting your cloak and trying to remember where you left your left boot, he's walking briskly between tents, chatting with blacksmiths, inspecting horse harnesses, and taste-testing coffee that tastes, generously, like disappointment. You follow along, notebook in hand, dodging puddles and nodding politely to soldiers who are much too awake for this hour. Gustavus stops at a newly dug latrine trench, compliments the angle of its construction, and moves on without missing a beat. This is a king who notices things. Take rations, for instance. Most monarchs don't care if their soldiers eat bark and chew leather as long as they fight. Gustavus? He insists on standardized supplies. He develops military warehouses with actual ledgers. He even experiments with dried peas as a durable, if uninspiring, protein source. One version was so bad it got nicknamed cannon fodder stew. But the soldiers eat it. And they respect him. Not because he's grand. Because he's present. You see him kneel to adjust a wounded soldier's bandage. You hear him laugh softly when someone presents a potato that looks vaguely like Denmark. You watch as he listens, really listens, to a private explain a better method of folding tents. Gustavus then tries it himself. It works. Under his leadership, Sweden's army begins to feel different. It's not just about who shouts the loudest anymore. It's about training, organization, rhythm. He structures regiments like living machines. Each part has a purpose. Each purpose is refined. Pikemen, musketeers, artillery, everyone drilled, everyone timed. You've never seen troops reload so fast while staying so quiet. There's even a moment, in the stillness before a march, where you swear the whole army breathes in sync. But it's not all clockwork. This is still war. Dirty, grinding, exhausting war. You pass through burned villages, fields scarred with wheel ruts and pike holes, and rivers swollen with runoff and regret. One evening, a boy no older than 15 brings Gustavus a torn flag rescued from a battle 3 days prior. The king kneels, actually kneels, to accept it. "Thank you," he says simply, then gives the boy his own gloves. Later, the story spreads like fire through camp. No one mentions the king's frostbitten fingers that week. What really sets Gustavus apart, though, isn't the tactics or the tea ration, which, frankly, is awful. It's the way he learns that he watches other armies. He reads reports. He studies what worked and, more importantly, what didn't. He knows that medieval lines of massed infantry are outdated, that cavalry without coordination is just expensive chaos, and that cannons shouldn't be treated like oversized lawn ornaments. So he adapts that he writes manuals. Short ones. Bullet points. Simple enough that even the most sleep-deprived captain can follow. And he posts them. Yes, physically posts them on the doors of supply wagons. It's like a 17th century bulletin board. If the bulletin included instructions for optimal musket angles, you remember one foggy morning when a group of officers argued over powder ratios. Gustavus walked over, took one of their rifles, fired it once into a tree, and said, "Now it works. Go eat." It's not flashy leadership, but it's clear, and while Sweden still doesn't have the population of France or the Navy of England, under Gustavus, it has something rare, momentum. You can feel it in the way the soldiers walk now. Less shuffling, more purpose. You can hear it in the camp songs. More harmony, fewer groans. Even the mess hall serves something resembling soup. You end your day watching the king sit beside a campfire, boots off, one foot soaking in a wooden tub. He reads a letter from home, smiles faintly, then folds it neatly and tucks it into his sleeve. The stars begin to appear, one by one, soft and pale against the endless sky. And despite the damp boots, the cold bread, and the odd itch in your shoulder from marching under pack all day, you feel it too. Something big is coming. But for now, there's just the crackle of firewood, the rustle of sleeping tents. and the gentle scratch of Gustavus writing one more line in his leather-bound notebook, possibly about soup logistics. Section 6. You wake to the sound of sleigh bells. Not the cheerful holiday kind, the grim, practical jingle of supply wagons rolling over frozen ground. Snow creaks under boot heels. Horses snort visible breath into the morning chill. And somewhere beyond the haze of sleep, Gustavus Adolphus is already lecturing someone about saddle straps. This, you've learned, is a typical morning in Gustavus's army. There are no lazy breakfasts, no lounging around in embroidered robes. Just parchment maps weighed down by stones, bread too dry to chew without soaking, and a king who insists that, if the artillery isn't ready by sunrise, we're the ones being buried. Today's agenda? Training. Not a battle. Not a siege. Just pure, repetitive, clockwork drilling. Because Gustavus has an idea, an innovation that keeps him awake at night and makes most of the old generals roll their eyes. He wants his army to move like one being, not thousands of confused limbs all trying their best. So you find yourself standing beside a snowy field, watching as small groups of musketeers, pikemen, and cavalry perform a routine that looks more like dance rehearsal than preparation for war. They step, they pivot, they reload, fire, and fall back in tight, coordinated lines, and in the middle of it all, Gustavus himself, bundled in a thick cloak, scribbles notes with a gloved hand while shouting things like, tighter formation. The Danes won't be throwing marshmallows. He's changed everything. Before Gustavus, most European armies moved in giant, sluggish blobs, lines so long they collapsed before they even touched the enemy. Artillery stayed far behind, firing maybe once every 20 minutes, more for morale than accuracy. Cavalry ran wide circles, impressive but often useless. Gustavus says no. No more blobs. He breaks the army into smaller, smarter parts, each company trained to fight, move, and think independently, but also act in concert when needed. Infantry fights in platoons. Cavalry supports and flanking arcs. Artillery travels with the front lines and lighter, mobile pieces that can be wheeled into position like particularly loud furniture. The best part? It works. You witness a mock skirmish where two of his own battalions simulate an ambush. The musketeers open a precise volley, then melt into the trees. Cavalry swoops around a hillock, vanishing behind a rise. The enemy barely has time to react. Gustavus doesn't cheer. He nods, says, "Now imagine they're Polish and angry," and resets the drill. Later, you're pulled aside to help copy a new training manual. It's not a leather-bound tome. It's 6 pages, no flourishes, written in large, clear script. He wants every captain, every sergeant, even the quartermasters to understand not just what to do, but why. The title, On Motion and Fire. Short, simple, almost poetic. It includes everything from line spacing to powder rationing. One section is just a list of things that should not be eaten under any circumstance, including buttons soaked in broth and experimental potato wine. Around you, the army starts to shift, not just in form, but in feeling. This is no longer a bunch of farmers handed spears and told to scream loudly. This is a force, purpose-built, streamlined, resilient. You start hearing terms like volley discipline and fallback arcs in casual conversation over porridge. Soldiers start requesting drills. Officers ask questions about terrain angles. And Gustavus, he walks the lines with a quiet satisfaction, occasionally adjusting a soldier's musket grip or handing out apples wrapped in spare linen. One night, in his tent, you ask him what he's really building. A nation, he says, not looking up from his notes. But first, an army that doesn't panic when someone yells in German. You both laugh. Outside, the snow begins again, falling softly on the canvas rooftops, muffling boots and muttering. A drummer practices a new cadence by the firelight. The rhythm is slow, steady, confident. You watch Gustavus draw a small diagram, a triangle within a square, with arrows around the edges. He labels it movement before shock. He closes the notebook, finally, and sighs. Tomorrow, we try it uphill. Of course you do, because in this army, uphill is just part of the plan. Section 7. You're not sure when it changed. Maybe it was the new tents. or the way the mess lines got quieter. Maybe it was the maps, how they stopped showing just Sweden and started creeping into Germany, Bohemia, and the Holy Roman Empire. But one morning, as you sit stirring a bowl of oats that taste faintly of moss and regret, it hits you. This isn't just a Swedish army anymore. It's a European army, and it's on the move. The year is 1630. Gustavus Adolphus is 36, though it's hard to tell. He still charges into rivers without waiting for the bridge. Still corrects gun placements midstorm. Still insists on carrying his own maps. The beard's a little thicker now, maybe. The eyes sharper. Or perhaps just more tired. And the war, well, it's gotten significantly messy, eh? This is the 30 Years' War, though that name won't come until much later. Right now, everyone just calls it the war, as if there's only one. And in some ways, there is. A huge, ugly, tangled web of religious tension, dynastic ambition, and political anxiety stretching across Central Europe like a spilled plate of noodles. It started in 1618 with a window and a few angry Bohemian nobles. Long story. But by now, it has consumed half the continent. Protestants versus Catholics. Empires versus kings. Armies raised and raised within months. Entire cities turned to ash. You once met a baker in Saxony who hadn't baked bread in a decade. Too risky, he said. Flour invited soldiers. So why does Gustavus want in? Sweden is still recovering from years of conflict. His military reforms are barely taking root. His treasury is, let's call it, slightly thin. And yet, here he is, standing on the edge of the Baltic Sea, cape fluttering in the coastal wind, preparing to land in Pomerania. Why? Because he doesn't trust anyone else to do it right. The Holy Roman Empire, largely Catholic, is crushing Protestant forces throughout Germany. Town after town has fallen. Armies of mercenaries burn everything, then switch sides if someone pays better. The Protestant cause is losing, badly. Gustavus isn't just a king. He's a Lutheran king. A Protestant reformer with military credentials and a personal distaste for seeing untrained warlords run entire provinces into mud and ashes. So he sails. He lands in July. The coast is windy, the welcome lukewarm. German princes are nervous. Who is this Swedish king with a mobile cannon corps and unusually neat boots? Why does he speak Latin better than their bishops? What does he want? Gustavus gives them a speech. In it, he promises not to plunder, not to burn, not to leave their homes in ruin. He says he's here to defend the faith, but you notice he never says which faith, just the faith. Clever, but words aren't enough. He needs a victory. Quickly. So he finds one. A small force loyal to the Holy Roman Emperor is stationed nearby. Gustavus attacks it not like a raider, but like a surgeon. His infantry deploy in precise lines, rotating volleys like clockwork. His cavalry doesn't charge wildly, it swings wide, and circles, and presses gently like a book closing. The enemy breaks. It's not a major battle, but it's fast, clean, impressive, and it sends a message to the German states. Gustavus Adolphus is not here to play catch-up. He's here to change the rules. You remember him that night, sitting by the fire, scribbling notes on the back of a captured letter. He's not gloating. He's revising. We can deploy 2 volleys before they reload, he mutters. Good, but not enough. He has a vision for this war, not just to win it, to out-evolve it. Soon, smaller Protestant states start sending envoys. Not all, but some. They want protection, training, food. Gustavus offers all 3 with caveats. No looting, no reprisals. Orders must be followed. He doesn't just want allies. He wants a team. And slowly, reluctantly, Germany begins to tilt. You ride beside him across endless plains. Watch him stop to chat with farmers. Watch him pay for hay with actual coin. Watch him order a camp moved because the old one trampled someone's orchard. His army becomes known for its discipline. Not perfection, but order. A strange thing in this war. That winter, snow falls hard. The tents shiver under ice. Soldiers share mittens. Gustavus insists on walking through camp at least once a night, checking on sentries, asking about rations. You trail behind him, nearly asleep on your feet, until he stops beside a sleeping line of infantry and says quietly, "If this works, they'll remember us differently." And then he walks on. Section 9. By now, you've stopped trying to figure out where you are based on town names. Most of them have changed flags 3 times in a week, and Gustavus insists on pronouncing them in 6 different languages depending on the mood. One day it's Erfurt. The next, he calls it the place with the good butter. But wherever you are, the pattern has shifted. After Breitenfeld, things are different. Gustavus isn't just a visiting monarch anymore. He's a major power in the Holy Roman Empire, without technically being part of the Holy Roman Empire. German princes who once gave him side-eyeing now send polite letters, complete with flattery and suspicious pastries. Cities open their gates before he even knocks. Some of them even sweep the streets. The Swedish camp grows, not just in size, but in shape. There are more engineers now, more linguists, a man who claims to be both a cartographer and a dentist. Gustavus doesn't question it. He just gives him a tent and asks for a map of Saxony and floss recommendations. You walk through camp one morning and find something new. Order. Tents aligned perfectly. Latrines marked clearly. Cooking fires spaced by regulation. Even the laundry lines are strung in neat rows. Gustavus has instilled a kind of military feng shui. Soldiers march not just in step, but in mood, alert, efficient, unhurried. He hasn't done this by yelling. He's done it by showing up, inspecting the grain, asking how the boots fit, giving medals to cooks who save flour, and, occasionally, threatening to reorganize the entire baggage train himself if no one else will. Then comes the diplomatic part. It's easy to forget, amid the marches and musket drills, that Gustavus isn't just a commander. He's a king, which means paperwork, treaties, endless, flowery letters from nobles who want to join his cause as long as it involves zero danger and maximum bragging rights. One envoy even offers to pledge support if Gustavus agrees to name his dog Frederick. Gustavus politely declines, citing canine autonomy. But there's one letter that catches his eye. It's from the city of Mainz, an influential Catholic stronghold that's wavering, quietly asking what it would cost to be liberated. Gustavus raises an eyebrow, sets down his soup, and murmurs, "I suppose we could liberate them gently." And so begins the campaign through the Rhineland. You ride beside him as the army moves west. Not in a rush, no. This isn't a frantic invasion. It's a walking negotiation. He sends scouts ahead not just to survey roads, but to check bakeries, confirm hospital capacity, and inquire whether the mayor likes music. Because Gustavus has realized something important: war wins battles. But logistics win wars. He reorganizes supply chains. He rotates troops to avoid fatigue. He sends letters to local leaders before he arrives, explaining rules of engagement and promising no looting, as long as everyone cooperates and, preferably, offers coffee. You watch him one afternoon haggling over oats with a very skeptical abbot. The man asks what a Lutheran king wants with a monastery. Gustavus replies, "Better storage. And I like the acoustics." It works. The abbot hands over the keys. Every step deeper into Germany brings more territory under his influence. But it's not conquest in the old sense. There are no mass executions. No fields of fire. Gustavus insists on paying for supplies, on punishing theft, on speaking to peasants in their own dialect, with decent pronunciation. One evening, you find him learning a local folk song from a miller's daughter. He gets the rhythm wrong, but claps in time anyway. She laughs. He laughs. And for a moment, you forget this is the man who commands thousands and just broke the Catholic League's front line. But the empire doesn't forget. Emperor Ferdinand II watches all of this from Vienna with growing alarm. His advisors whisper that Gustavus is becoming too popular, too efficient, too likable. So they call in someone new, someone strange. A man named Albrecht von Wallenstein, a commander with a mysterious past, a spooky stare, and enough ambition to outpace a cavalry regiment. Gustavus hears the news without blinking. "Good," he says. "I was beginning to get bored." You know better. He's not bored. He's calculating. As the fire dies down that night, he calls for more ink and asks you to fetch his night map. It's the special one, parchment over linen, edges singed. covered in tiny movable pieces. He's thinking of terrain, rivers, weather, reinforcement routes, and for the first time in weeks, he sets aside his berry tea and reaches for coffee. The war is changing again, but so is he. Section 10. It's early spring now, and the ground is trying its best to thaw. There's mud, sure, but not the good kind. This is that ankle-deep, sock-ruining, shoe-stealing kind of mud that sticks to your soul. And into this cheerful mess strides Gustavus Adolphus, clean boots somehow still defying nature, cloak perfectly draped, and eyes sharper than ever. Because today he's playing host. French envoys have arrived. They wear satin. Their boots are polished. Their words even more so. These are Richelieu's men. Diplomats sent from Catholic France to meet with the Protestant king of Sweden and discuss, of all things, an alliance. It's a strange moment in European politics. France, though Catholic, fears the growing strength of the Habsburgs, who, inconveniently, share a faith, but not much else. Gustavus, Protestant champion, sees the benefit of French gold and naval cooperation. The result? Awkward brunch. You're standing off to the side, pretending to examine a map of central Germany while eavesdropping shamelessly. Gustavus makes polite jokes about wine quality. The French flatter his military discipline. Someone makes a reference to Roman history. Everyone nods wisely. But the subtext is clear. War makes strange bedfellows. The meeting goes well. So well, in fact, that Gustavus offers the envoys a tour of his artillery. You trail behind as he points out carriage designs, rate of fire improvements, and a particularly well-behaved horse named Eric. The diplomats pretend to be interested. One takes notes. You're not sure they understand the difference between a culverin and a falconet, but Gustavus doesn't mind. He's already thinking 2 alliances ahead. Because while he's winning on the battlefield, Gustavus knows the real war is still being decided behind velvet curtains and candlelit desks. But that doesn't mean the marching stops. After Breitenfeld, after the Rhineland, Gustavus moves south, toward Bavaria, stronghold of the Catholic League and personal playground of Duke Maximilian. The Duke has armies, fortresses, and something Gustavus finds mildly irritating. Arrogance. So Gustavus decides to pay him a visit. You're there for the planning. Days of discussions around wooden tables littered with open inkwells, half-eaten bread, and small lead figures shaped like soldiers. Gustavus lays out his thoughts quietly, often while peeling an apple. If they expect us to take the road, he murmurs, we'll take the forest. And so you do. The advance into Bavaria is elegant. Not fast, not loud. Just precise. You watch Gustavus reorganize bridges, redirect supply trains, rebuild roads so cannons won't sink into marshes. He's not racing toward a target. He's setting the stage. Each mile gained is a rehearsal. Then comes rain. Yes, with a capital R. Because on the 15th of April, 1632, the Bavarian village of Rain becomes the site of yet another one of those tidy, effective, oddly polite Gustavus battles. The enemy is Marshal Tilly himself. Yes, still alive, still dramatic, now slightly more wary. Gustavus crosses the river, like using floating bridges under enemy fire. Floating. Bridges. Under. Fire. You're there, trying not to look directly at the cannonballs skipping across the water like very aggressive stones. Gustavus rides across last, cloak flapping, one glove off to feel the ropes for tension. The battle is swift. Swedish artillery opens the field like a curtain. Tilly is wounded. His army shatters. The Bavarian heartland is exposed. Gustavus does not gloat that he spends the evening reviewing bridge engineering diagrams and adjusting the sugar level in his evening tea. Too sweet, he mutters, as if defeating a major general is secondary to the perfect brew. And the cities? They open like flowers. Augsburg welcomes him. Then Munich. Lutheran churches ring bells for hours. Protestant refugees crawl from cellars with shaking hands and offer bread. Gustavus, ever the gentleman, bows politely, thanks them, and immediately inspects the fortifications. Even in triumph, he's working that he wants to create more than victories. He wants to build a network, a Protestant Germany linked not just by treaties, but by infrastructure, uniforms, common laws, roads you can actually walk without breaking an ankle. You see it in the new troops joining the army, German recruits, former merchants, even students. Gustavus trains them, feeds them, gives them boots. One boy salutes wrong. Gustavus smiles, corrects him, and says, "You'll learn." And he will, because this is a new kind of army, and its king, still just getting started. Section 11. At first, it's just a whisper. Nothing official. No sealed letters. No royal proclamations. Just murmurs, low and uncertain, rippling through taverns and campfires and drafty court chambers. Wallenstein is back. And Gustavus? He just nods, as if he expected this twist all along. You don't know much about Albrecht von Wallenstein at first. Just vague rumors. Czech nobleman, genius, or madman, maybe both. Master of logistics, master of staring into the void and making the void blink first. He's led imperial armies before, then got fired for being too powerful. Now he's returned, summoned back by Emperor Ferdinand to stop Gustavus's march across Germany. Gustavus doesn't panic, but he does slow down. Not in movement, but in pace. He studies more, sends more scouts, writes longer, tighter orders. Starts asking strange questions like, how quickly can we move a bakery cart across hilly terrain? Wallenstein isn't like other generals. He doesn't bluster. He doesn't ride into battle in feathers and gold. He builds. He digs in. He plays the long game. And Gustavus knows it. You see the shift right away. Gone is the confident sweep through welcoming Protestant cities. Gone is the tidy advance with fresh uniforms and predictable victories. Now, Gustavus is in unfamiliar territory, physically and mentally. It's May 1632. Gustavus has just taken Munich, but instead of celebrating, he's pacing the war tent at night, running his finger along the edge of a map, again and again, like he's tracing a ghost. Then comes the rumor Wallenstein is building a new army from scratch, fast. Mercenaries, engineers, cavalry, heavy guns. No parades, just movement. The Swedish camp tightens. You feel it in the air, quieter mornings, sharper drills, fewer jokes at mealtime. Gustavus still walks among the men, still offers calm reassurances. But his eyes? Constantly searching the horizon. One night, as rain taps softly on the tent roof, Gustavus invites a few commanders to dinner. He serves cold meat, half a melon, and a bottle of something that smells suspiciously medicinal. Then he lays out his plan. We draw him out. He says simply, he's cautious. Let's give him reason not to be. You blink, it's bold. Dangerous. But very Gustavus.so, he sends out small forces to disrupt Wallenstein's network, raiding supply lines, blocking roads, spreading rumors. He visits towns personally, wins support, builds alliances. But Wallenstein doesn't bite. Instead, he fortifies, positions his troops in tight, defensive lines. Refuses to engage. It's like shadowboxing a glacier. Even Gustavus, for all his mobility and reform, can't force a fight unless Wallenstein allows it. You travel with the king through dusty roads and thick forests, looking for openings. Once, you pass an abandoned village, half-burned, eerily quiet, a child's toy lying in the mud. Gustavus stops, dismounts, walks the perimeter, then simply says, too late. There are no speeches. Just resolve. That summer, everything slows. Not in boredom, but in tension. Both armies wait, circle, maneuver like chess pieces that know the next move might be the last. During this lull, Gustavus visits a Lutheran school in Nuremberg. He watches children recite scripture. He asks one boy what he wants to be. The boy answers, tall. Gustavus laughs for the first time in weeks. But you can tell. He's thinking of Wallenstein. Of what kind of man watches and waits and builds silence like a fortress. Back at camp, Gustavus starts refining again. He upgrades cannon carriages, introduces firelock muskets, revises his marching formations to adapt to hillier terrain. He's preparing for something big. He writes letters to his wife. Longer now, more personal. Mentions headaches. Mentions dreams of returning to Sweden. Mentions how German wine is too sweet and the roads are never dry. You read one over his shoulder. He ends it with, "I'm not tired of war, but I'd like to miss it for a while." And then, at last, a message arrives. Wallenstein is on the move. North, towards Saxony. Gustavus doesn't hesitate that he folds the letter, buttons his coat, and says, "Let's go meet the mountain." Section 12. You don't remember exactly when the air began to feel heavier. Maybe it was crossing the Elbe, or that afternoon when the ravens wouldn't leave the training grounds. Or maybe it's just the fact that no one's talking above a whisper anymore, not even the cooks, who usually can't keep quiet about soup texture. Whatever it is, something shifted. You're approaching a town called Lutzen, and Gustavus Adolphus, he's too quiet. It's late autumn, 1632. The skies stay gray. The roads suck at your boots like they want to keep you. And everywhere, there's the smell of damp leaves and slow decay, the kind that creeps in behind your collar and doesn't leave. But Gustavus presses on. You watch him ride ahead in a long green cloak, hair tied back, sword glinting just slightly under a thick sky. He rides not like a man heading to battle, but like someone on his way to an appointment. Focused, undistracted. Then you see it. A message rider galloping into camp, muddy to the eyebrows, breathless. Wallenstein's army is here, entrenched near Lutzen, thousands strong. Cannons in position. Earthworks already dug. Gustavus reads the note, folds it carefully, and says, "Good. We'll wake him up." You don't sleep that night. No one does. It's not nerves. Not entirely. It's just that Gustavus insists on final briefings, troop checks, lantern inspections, and a long, quiet walk through the infantry lines, touching shoulders and murmuring encouragements like prayers. You trail behind him, wondering when he last sat down. And then, morning, or something like it. The sun doesn't rise so much as smear itself across a low ceiling of mist. Everything is pale and muffled. You can barely see past the next horse. Officers bark orders like they're talking through wool. And Gustavus, he's wearing a plain buff coat, no armor. He says it slows him down. Says he wants to be able to move freely, lead directly. The men need to see him. Besides, the breastplate never fit quite right anyway. You follow him to the front, your hands already cold, your breath trailing in white strands. He pauses, adjusts his gloves, looks out over the fog-shrouded plain, and smiles just slightly. "Let's start," he says. The Battle of Lutzen begins in a kind of dream. Swedish cannons fire blindly into fog. Infantry stumbles through muddy fields, formations shifting like shadows. Wallenstein's men respond tight, measured, brutally efficient. At one point, you lose sight of everything for 10 whole minutes and start considering whether you're technically in the battle anymore or just lost in a very loud cloud. But Gustavus doesn't hesitate. He rides forward, far forward. Too far. His voice cuts through the haze, steady and sharp, directing cavalry, adjusting artillery. He leads charges himself, saber flashing. You see him for a moment, just a moment, astride his horse, green cloak streaming behind him, hair undone, face calm. Then, he vanishes. It's not dramatic. There's no trumpet, no lightning crack. Just silence. A horse without a rider, emerging from the fog. Then a murmur. Then a messenger. Then confirmation. He's down, shot in the side. Then the back. Then finished off in the confusion by soldiers who likely didn't even know who he was. The news spread slowly, like cold water down a sleeve. But here's the strange part. The army doesn't break. The Swedish line holds. Officers step up. Formations adjust. Orders, pre-planned, precise, Gustavus's style, are carried out. They win the battle. Barely. It's not glorious. It's muddy, miserable, and full of grief. You find his body later, stripped of weapons, half buried in a ditch, his boots missing. You stare at him for a long time, not because he's a king, but because he never once acted like he was above the march. He died leading. Later, the soldiers build a rough cross from scavenged wood. Someone ties a piece of green cloth around it. Someone else sings, not loudly, just a hum. You sit near the fire that night, numb. The army is leaderless but intact, the cause uncertain but unbroken. And you? You think about all the mornings he started before dawn, all the maps he redrew, all the names he remembered, all the little things that made him different. Lutzen wasn't supposed to be his end, but history rarely waits for permission. Section 13. The first thing that surprises you is how quiet the aftermath is. Not the battlefield. Lutzen is still littered with broken pikes, burned wagons, and the soft moan of wind tugging at torn banners. But the camp, the Swedish camp, usually alive with the clatter of orders, firewood, and someone always arguing about stew. No? Barely a whisper. The news of Gustavus's death spreads not in shouts, but in the stillness that follows them. One by one, soldiers stop what they're doing. A musket is left half cleaned. A saddle remains unbuckled. You watch a young officer simply sit down beside a barrel and hold his head in his hands. No one quite knows what to do. Gustavus Adolphus had not just been a king, not just a commander, but a rhythm, a pulse. He moved the army by movement, by trust, by example. He was the one who remembered the drummer boy's name and reminded the quartermasters to count the boots twice. And now that pulse has stopped. But life, stubborn, relentless, goes on. His body is retrieved, cleaned gently, wrapped in layers of linen and reverence. A quiet vigil is held, not with sermons, but with soft prayers and shared memories. Someone places a worn notebook at his side, its cover singed, corners curled. You recognize it. He'd written in it almost every night. The march resumes the next day. Because it has to. Command temporarily shifts to Chancellor Oxenstierna, Gustavus's loyal friend and political opposite, more administrator than warrior, but steady. Oxenstierna sends word to Sweden, to the Queen, to the world. And the world takes a breath. In Protestant courts, mourning is tinged with fear. Who now will stand against the Habsburgs? In Catholic halls, relief flickers behind rosaries. One powerful rival removed, but at what cost? And in neutral cities, the name Gustavus Adolphus is suddenly spoken with a kind of reverent caution, like someone who might still walk through the door. You remain in Germany a while longer. It's different now. The Swedish army still fights, still wins at times. But there's a layer of shadow over everything. Recruits still drill, but without the same swagger. Officers still gather at tables, but the maps are marked with smaller movements. The war continues, but the energy? It's changed. You attend a small memorial in Erfurt. A makeshift altar, candles dripping wax into a cannon shell, and a choir of villagers singing a Lutheran hymn Gustavus used to hum while riding. The notes rise through the rafters of a half-burned church. You cry, just a little. Not because he was flawless, he wasn't. He could be impatient, occasionally arrogant, and he once redesigned an entire supply chain just because the bread came out slightly stale. But because he cared. He believed that kings should walk with their soldiers, that warfare should have rules, that nations could rise by discipline instead of cruelty. Later, you help organize his personal belongings. A few books. His favorite compass. A letter never sent to his wife, folded neatly between map pages. It simply reads, "I miss home." The snow, even. You pause. Outside, the snow is falling again. Quiet, steady, softening the edges of the broken earth. And maybe that's how it ends, not with a bang or a monument, but with silence. With footsteps disappearing into snow. With soldiers walking forward, because that's what he taught them to do. Gustavus Adolphus didn't leave behind an empire. He left a legacy of innovation, of resilience, of a strange, stubborn dream that maybe, just maybe, a kingdom built on structure and compassion could last longer than any single king. You tighten your cloak. You walk on, because history doesn't stop. It simply waits to be written again. Section 14. You don't expect the music. It's been months since Gustavus Adolphus's death at Lutzen, and the world, ever in motion, has done what it always does. It moved on, if a little slower. The war continues, the armies march, the snow melts, and the diplomats gather. But one quiet evening in a university town near Leipzig, you find yourself standing in the back of a chapel as a group of students rehearse a hymn written in his honor. It's simple, just voices and memory. No trumpet, no crown, no blazing altar. Just notes. The words drift upward, and for a moment, the war seems far away. You close your eyes. Because the legacy of Gustavus Adolphus isn't just found on bloodied fields or in the margins of battle maps. It's here, in the rhythms of disciplined soldiers who still drill in his formations, in the quiet sermons where Lutheran pastors still quote him, in the dusty corners of war colleges where students still copy his diagrams with soft pencil stubs. He's become something bigger than a man. A system. A model. A warning, too. Military historians, you've met a few now, talk about him in terms of innovation. The father of modern warfare, they call him. The one who made coordination matter more than chaos. Who realized firepower meant nothing without timing, and who taught armies to breathe as one. He gave Europe a glimpse of what was possible, an army that respected civilians. A king who didn't stay behind the lines. A structure built not on fear, but on trust. But there's more to him than tactics. Gustavus was, somehow, human through it all. Even now, people still pass along stories of the time he shared a blanket with a feverish foot soldier, or the way he'd fall asleep mid-map with ink on his nose, or how he once apologized to a horse for yelling. And that humanity, the little quirks and worn gloves and sideways grins, is what made him feel real, not remote. So while France and Sweden continue to bicker over who should lead the Protestant cause, while Oxenstierna works late into the night shuffling alliances like playing cards, while generals tweak Gustavus's methods and scribble their own names in the margins, you sit in this chapel and realize the man's gone, but the blueprint remains. You spend the next weeks watching as his ideas ripple outward. Other generals adapt his battlefield mobility. They tinker with platoon tactics, experiment with field guns, imitate his decentralized command structure. Some do it poorly. Some make it worse. But the fact remains, he changed the expectations, and not just for war.in Sweden. Word spreads of reforms he left half-finished, education programs, trade routes, legal updates. His daughter, Christina, is still a child, but the machinery he set in motion keeps turning. You walk through a town square where a statue is going up, not grand, not gilded. Just a figure on horseback, one hand pointing not to the sky, but down, toward the path, the march, the road ahead. You pause a while. It's raining, lightly. You think about how he never made it home, and how, somehow, his home grew anyway, not in land, but in influence. In the fact that even those who once feared him now study him. Even enemies admit he knew what he was doing. And young cadets still quote his battlefield maxims when trying to stay awake during drills. You meet an old soldier once, in a tavern outside Dresden. He fought at Breitenfeld, marched through Bavaria, almost lost a toe at Rain. You ask him what Gustavus was like. He shrugs. Smiles, walked like he owned the road, he says. But always said thank you to the baker. And that's it, isn't it? Not just the fire and frost, not the flags or the formations, but the small, quiet details of a king who believed order could be kind, and war, if it must be fought, should never forget the people holding the line. Section 15. And now, you've come to the end, not of the war, not yet, but of the journey with him. The roads stretch on through Germany, and the Swedish army continues to move, now more slowly, more carefully. There are new commanders, new negotiations, new lines drawn on old maps. But every time someone sets up a tent in straight rows or lines up a cannon just so, it feels like Gustavus is still there, watching, approving, adjusting the angle by 2 degrees. His death didn't halt the war, but it changed it. The momentum he built carries forward, but the heart of it, the rhythm, the improvisation, the personal touch, is missing. Like a drumline marching perfectly in step, but without the melody that once hummed between the beats. And you've walked through it all. From the frostbitten hills of Livonia to the mud-slick battlefields of Saxony. From the crackling firelight in winter tents to the echo of hymns in broken chapels. You've watched Gustavus Adolphus not just make war, but reshape it. He was never meant to be a legend. He would have hated that. Legends sit on thrones. They stay back. They wear polished armor and talk only in grand declarations. Gustavus cursed at stuck wagon wheels. He rewrote battle plans during lunch. He once stopped an entire march because he thought he saw a better spot for a latrine. But he also led from the front. He charged through smoke, issued orders while drenched in rain, and stood beside engineers arguing about bridge lengths. He remembered names. He apologized when he lost his temper. He refused to ask soldiers to go anywhere he hadn't already been. He was, above all, present. That's what people remember. Not just that he won, but how he won. With structure. With humanity. With an oddly intense focus on footwear. And now, with the war grinding on without him, the world begins to measure others against his shadow. Commanders try to be the next Gustavus. Some succeed, partially. Others miss the point entirely. Because he wasn't just about tactics. He was about the why. Why discipline matters. Why a soldier who trusts their leader fights harder. Why a cannon in the right place can end a battle before it begins. Why a king must walk among his people, even when there's snow in his boots and fire on the horizon. His daughter, Christina, will grow up to wear his crown. She'll face her own battles, none of them on horseback, but just as fierce. The Sweden he left her is more than land and taxes. It's a nation defined by structure, faith, and the belief that kings are made, not born. You leave the army in early spring, not because you're tired of war, but because, somehow, your part in this story feels finished. You walk north, past ruined villages, past peaceful fields starting to bloom again, past rivers that once swelled with supply barges and now carry only birdsong and thawed branches. In a town square far from the front, you pass a boy playing with wooden soldiers. He's lined them up in staggered formation, 3 ranks, alternating positions. You smile. He doesn't know who Gustavus was. Not yet. But the shape of the army, the rhythm of it, is still there. The legacy remains. And maybe one day, in some quiet classroom or under the soft flicker of candlelight, that boy will read about the king who came from snow and built an army like no one else. And maybe, like you, he'll understand what it meant. To walk behind Gustavus. To keep pace with purpose. To march not toward glory, but toward order. You find a bench beside a river, sit down, and let the wind move past you. No cannons. No orders. Just the quiet. And you realize, that's how he'd want it to end. And now, as the night settles in and the last footsteps fade from view, we let go of the road. The banners are folded. The drums have fallen silent. Somewhere far off, a single candle still flickers in a cold window, but here, it's quiet. Gentle. Still that you've walked through years of frost and thunder beside a king who never stopped moving. You've watched battles unfold, not as explosions of chaos, but as careful steps in a long, slow dance. And now, you get to rest, let your breath slow. Let the images grow softer. No more muskets or maps. No more morning drills or muddy boots. Just the memory of a leader who believed that movement could be meaningful and that power could be quiet. The roads behind you are lined with pine and snow, but ahead, just smooth trails and soft wind. The stars above are clear now, like chalk marks on velvet. The air is still. The story is done. And there's nothing more you need to carry that you've heard his story. Now let it settle. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of marching fade to the rhythm of your breath. You're safe. You're warm. You've made it through history, and now it's time to drift away. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep deeply. Sleep long. End of script. Sweet dreams.